The movie begins by showing a white-haired man from the town of Ishval. The man is nicknamed Scar because of the scars that are clearly visible on his face. That night, Scar was seen on a bridge where he was about to start a fight against a silver-based alchemist who was one of the residents of Amstris, a unitary state under the rule of a parliamentary republic. Before starting the fight, Scar told him that the alchemists who oppose God must be destroyed. Their fight was quite fierce, but Scar finally managed to defeat the alchemist and drowned him in the river. Seeing how Scar killed the man so cruelly and also the sentence he said before the fight, it is certain that Scar did it because he wanted revenge against the alchemists who came from Amstris. The scene then switches and shows Edward Elric and his younger brother, Alphonse, who are rushing to catch the train to Central City because Edward plans to take the State Alchemist exam. When they finally manage to board the train, the Elric brothers accidentally meet a young man named Ling Yao who comes from Xing, a monarchy, whose monarch holds the title of emperor. At first, Ling Yao told the Elric brothers that he intended to study alchemy in Amstris. Upon hearing that, Edward and Alphonse were impressed with Ling Yao, who was willing to take a very long journey to study alchemy. Even though Xing was famous for alchemy, an alternate type of alchemy that operates on the concept of fashioning elixirs and is focused on mainly medicinal purposes. However, Edward's face immediately turned annoyed when Ling Yao asked them about the existence of the Philosopher's Stone. Ling Yao is apparently intent on obtaining the Philosopher's Stone to gain immortality and assumes that Edward and Alphonse know about it, although they try to deny it. But before Edward could explain anything to Ling Yao, the train they were traveling on was suddenly hijacked by bandits who intended to kill a high-ranking military official who happened to be riding the same train. However, the bandits were easily defeated by two of Ling Yao's bodyguards who had quite formidable fighting skills. When Edward and Alphonse were about to leave the railroad car, they were immediately blocked by Ling Yao's bodyguards because Ling Yao wanted information about the Philosopher's Stone from them. As the Elric brothers were reluctant to reveal anything about the Philosopher's Stone, they engaged in a fierce battle against Ling Yao's bodyguards. While Alphonse managed to defeat one of Ling Yao's bodyguards and remove his mask, Edward seemed overwhelmed by the bodyguards who did not hesitate to use grenades in the middle of their fight. Edward managed to push the masked bodyguard until they engaged in a fierce battle on the train. Edward, who couldn't hold back anymore, then launched an attack and managed to tear off the bodyguard's mask. Surprisingly, the bodyguard turned out to be a young woman named Lan Fan, so Edward immediately discouraged further attacks. However, Edward's carelessness was immediately taken advantage of by Lan Fan, who then threw a grenade at him and made him almost fall off the train. Fortunately, Edward was saved by Captain Hughes, who smiled at him and teased him for letting his guard down. However, Edward immediately realized that the one who saved him was not the real Captain Hughes because he had passed away. Realizing that Edward is not easily fooled, the fake Captain Hughes then reveals his true identity, which is none other than Envy. Envy tells Edward that he saved Edward because he is a very important potential human sacrifice to achieve their goal, so he will not let him die before fulfilling his role in their big plan. Ling Yao, who realizes that Envy is not an ordinary human, but a homunculus that lives off the power of the Philosopher's Stone, then orders his bodyguards to capture him and learn about the immortality possessed by the homunculus. Afterward, Edward and Alphonse rushed back into the train to tie up the bandits, who revealed that their goal was to take an Amstrian military officer hostage to demand the release of their colleagues who were captured some time ago. In addition, one of the bandits also revealed that he had blown the train's brakes and planned to crash the train at the Central City station to kill them all. Upon learning that, Edward and Alphonse rushed to the train machinist's railroad car, looking for a way to stop the train. But they were pushed off the train by one of the bandits. Since the train was about to reach the Central City station, which was the last stop, Edward mobilized all his alchemist powers to stop the train. After the train was successfully stopped and no one was injured, the bandits were immediately secured by military soldiers led by Colonel Roy Mustang and his loyal subordinate, Lieutenant Reza Hawkeye. Surprisingly, the military officer who was about to be killed by the bandits turned out to be King Bradley, the leader of Amstris. Upon arrival at the military headquarters, Mustang informed the Elric brothers about the serial murder case targeting the strongest alchemists. Mustang explained that the killer was nicknamed Scar because he had a large scar on his forehead. Because they haven't caught the killer yet, Mustang orders several soldiers to protect the Elric brothers. But Edward, who didn't like the idea, then invited his brother to run away from the soldiers who were escorting them. While fleeing to the city, the Elric brothers accidentally meet a girl named Mei Chang and her tiny panda pet, Xiaomei, who is from Xing. Just like Ling Yao, Mei Chang came to Amstris in search of the Philosopher's Stone because she also wanted to obtain immortality. Instead of thanking him for being treated to a full lunch, Mei Chang mocked Edward, so that Edward felt irritated and then chased after Mei Chang, who immediately ran away after making him angry. However, while chasing Mei Chang, the Elric brothers met Scar, who already knew about Edward, nicknamed Fullmetal Alchemist, and intended to kill him. Realizing that they couldn't beat Scar alone, Edward invited his brother to save themselves. However, Scar caught up with them, so the Elric brothers were forced to fight against Scar. With his extraordinary strength, Scar manages to overturn Alphonse and destroy Edward's prosthetic arm. When Scar was about to kill Edward, Mustang and his subordinates finally arrived at the scene and managed to stop him. Because Mustang couldn't use his flame-based alchemy because it was raining, one of his subordinates named Alex Louis Armstrong then advanced against Scar by combining his alchemical skills with physical prowess. With the help of Lieutenant Hawkeye and Lieutenant Havoc, Alex managed to corner Scar until he finally chose to run away. After that, Mustang told the Elric brothers about Ishval's civil war that happened several years ago. Before the war took place, Ishval was actually often involved in disputes with the Amstress government because of differences in culture and beliefs that they adhered to, where the residents of Ishval believed that their power came from the god they worshipped, Ishvara. Mustang assumed that Scar wanted to take revenge on Amstress for the suffering that the Ishvalans had endured due to the war. In addition to killing many Ishval residents, the war had also caused Scar and the Ishvalans who survived the war to become homeless, so it was quite natural that they hated the alchemists from Amstress because they used to be weapons of war sent by the Amstress government to conquer Ishval. Meanwhile, Scar, who was walking in the underground tunnel, met Envy and Gluttony who intended to kill him. At the same time, Ling Yao and his bodyguards arrived at the place after following Envy's trail. But when they were about to fight, Scar deliberately blew up the place, so they were forced to flee and abandon their intention to fight. The next day, Edward finally arrived in Resemble to visit the Rockbell automail run by Pinocchio Rockbell, who is Winry's grandmother. Edward intended to repair his prosthetic arm and also Alphonse's steel armor body, which was destroyed by attacks from Scar. While waiting for Winry to repair his prosthetic arm, Edward took the time to go to his mother's grave, which was located nearby. Surprisingly, Edward met his father, Van Hohenheim, and they got into an argument because Edward still felt annoyed at his father who had abandoned his family, so his mother had to work hard to take care of and raise him and his brother. Elsewhere, Scar was rescued by Mei Chang, who took Scar to a village outside the city. The village turned out to be inhabited by Ishval residents who survived the war that had devastated their territory and killed many Ishval residents. Scar then met his master, who advised him to stop his attempts to take revenge. Moreover, he took revenge on alchemists who were not involved in the war, which also indicated that Scar had killed innocent people. Scar seemed to contemplate the advice from his master, even though hatred and revenge still churned in his heart. Meanwhile, Edward accidentally eavesdrops on his father's conversation with Pinocchio, who mentions Xerxes, an ancient country that was destroyed in one night. Van Hohenheim warns Pinocchio that Amstress will suffer a fate like Xerxes, and advises Pinocchio that she be prepared for the disaster. Upon learning that, Edward headed to the ruins of Xerxes in the eastern desert to investigate the cause of the country's destruction. Arriving at the ruins of Xerxes, Edward is surrounded by the Ishvalans who have taken refuge in the place. When they were about to attack Edward, an old woman named Shan appeared and immediately stopped them. When Edward asked Shan to choose to help him, Shan explained that she could not forgive the people of Amstress because they had caused the Ishvalans to lose their homes and flee to a dry and barren desert region. Even so, Shan is a person who believes that not all residents of Amstress are bad people and tells Edward about two doctors from Amstress who have saved the residents of Ishval who were injured in the war. Edward then realized that the two doctors were Winry's parents, and the Ishvalan boy who accompanied Shan immediately confirmed this. The boy also mentioned Winry because it turned out that his parents often told him about Winry when they were treating him. However, Winry's parents had to suffer a tragic fate after one of the patients they treated killed them, and that patient was none other than Scar. Sometime later, Edward returned to Central City after getting the new prosthetic arm made by Winry. As he exits the train station, Edward is approached by a boy named Selim who turns out to be King Bradley's son. King Bradley tells Edward that his son idolizes him, and Selim immediately gets out of the car when he sees Edward walking out of the train station. Later that evening, after repairing Alphonse, Edward told him about the destruction that would hit Amstress, as Van Hohenheim had told Winry's grandmother before leaving Resemble. Edward assumed that the destruction might be related to the grand plan that the homunculus had alluded to, especially since they had said that Edward and his brother were the perfect human sacrifice candidates. So the homunculus would not let them die before performing their role in the grand plan. Surprisingly, Edward and Alphonse's conversation was overheard by Ling Yao, who was secretly watching them. Ling Yao then appeared before the Elric brothers and came up with a plan after learning that Edward and Alphonse intended to capture the homunculus to interrogate them about the big plan they were about to execute. Ling Yao, who wanted to learn about the secret of immortality from the homunculus, then offered cooperation to the Elric brothers while revealing that he was one of the princes of Xing and Mei Chang was his sister. Ling Yao explained that the Xing emperor was suffering from a severe illness, so his children vying for ways to cure him and prove their capability to the emperor, including Ling Yao and Mei Chang, who decided to go to Amstress to find the Philosopher's Stone, which was believed to make someone immortal. But Ling Yao was intent on staging a coup after obtaining the Philosopher's Stone so that he could become the next Xing emperor. The next day, the Elric brothers followed Ling Yao's plan to lure Scar's appearance so that the homunculus would come to protect them. As expected, Scar did appear and immediately attacked the Elric brothers. At the same time, Winry apparently followed the Elric brothers to the central city and was looking for their whereabouts to give something to Edward. In the middle of the battle, Edward mentioned about Winry's parents who were killed by Scar. Surprisingly, Winry, who had just arrived at the place, finally heard Edward's words and looked very shocked and frustrated when she found out that her parents were killed by the person they had saved. An angry Winry intended to take revenge on Scar by shooting him. But Edward quickly stopped her because he didn't want her to be filled with hatred and revenge that would only make her hurt even more. Seeing the actions Edward took to protect Winry, Scar remembered his older brother who was willing to sacrifice his life to protect him on the battlefield, and decided to leave the place. On the other hand, Ling Yao and his bodyguards finally managed to find the whereabouts of the homunculus and engaged in a battle with them. But in the middle of the fight, King Bradley suddenly appeared and immediately attacked Ling Yao. They engaged in a fierce battle until Ling Yao finally became overwhelmed as King Bradley managed to knock Lan Fan down. As they were about to escape, Lan Fan threw a grenade at King Bradley and managed to remove his left eye patch. Concurrently, Ling Yao also knew that King Bradley was a homunculus because he had the mark of the Ouroboros in his left eye, which is the hallmark of homunculus. After escaping from King Bradley, Ling Yao and Lan Fan tried to find the homunculus that might be heading to the Elric brothers' place. Meanwhile, Edward and his brother were again involved in a fierce battle against Scar after they delivered Winry to safety. In the middle of the fight, Gluttony suddenly appeared and directly attacked Scar, intending to devour him. At the same time, Ling Yao arrived at the place and immediately crammed a grenade into Gluttony's mouth to explode the homunculus, while Edward prepared steel ropes to tie Gluttony's body, and they finally managed to capture the homunculus as planned. Shortly afterward, Winry arrived at the place with Lieutenant Hawkeye, who immediately shot at Scar. But when Edward was about to capture Scar, Mei Chang suddenly appeared to save Scar and take him away from that place. However, unbeknownst to Mei Chang, Xiaomei was left behind when Mei Chang made a transmutation circle to teleport from that place to a safer place. Later that night, while waiting for Lan Fan, who was being treated by a doctor on Mustang's recommendation, Ling Yao told Mustang and the Elric brothers about King Bradley having the mark of the Ouroboros in his left eye, indicating that the leader of Amstress was a homunculus. Edward doesn't believe it at first because King Bradley has a son, while homunculus are known to be unable to have offspring. But Mustang tells Edward that Selim is the king's adopted son, so it is possible that King Bradley is a homunculus. Elsewhere, King Bradley is seen meeting a blonde man who calls him Wrath, which proves that he is indeed a homunculus. King Bradley seemed to respect the blonde man and told him about his plan to make Mustang as one of the human sacrifices in their big plan. In the meantime, Edward got into a conversation with Lieutenant Hawkeye, who told him about the war against the Ishval people 7 years ago. At that time, King Bradley sent the alchemists to stop the war by destroying the Ishval soldiers, and Scar was one of those soldiers. But when they were about to kill Scar, who was already seriously injured, suddenly Scar's older brother appeared and sacrificed his life to protect him. However, after Winry's parents healed him, Scar thought that Winry's parents had used alchemy and deliberately sacrificed his older brother's life to save his life, so the angry Scar immediately attacked Winry's parents and killed them. On the next day, Alphonse, who found and saved Xiaomei, intended to use Xiaomei to get the tiny panda to lead him to find Mei Chang's whereabouts. After Xiaomei managed to find Mei Chang, Alphonse secretly followed her to find Scar's hiding place. At night, Edward and Alphonse then sneaked into Scar's hideout and made sure Mei Chang had left the place before launching an attack. Edward managed to corner Scar, so he chose to flee. But unexpectedly, Alphonse had anticipated Scar's attempt to escape underground and managed to catch him. However, Scar didn't seem to give up so easily, as he then destroyed the entire building to withstand the attack from the Elric brothers, although his efforts ended in vain as Edward and Alphonse managed to immobilize him. Shortly afterward, Winry finally arrived at the place and Edward thought that she would take revenge on Scar. Surprisingly, Winry instead treated Scar's wounds so that he wouldn't bleed to death, while saying that her parents had tried to save him so that he would stay alive and she would do the same because she was their daughter. Even so, Winry can't forgive Scar for killing her parents, but she also doesn't want to waste her whole life just to hate and take revenge on him. Edward, Mustang and Lieutenant Hawkeye seemed impressed with Winry, who had been willing to ignore her anger and sadness to help the person who had killed her parents. On the other hand, Scar, who was touched by Winry's sincerity, apologized to her, although he could not deny that his apology might not change anything. At the same time, Ling Yao suddenly appeared and informed them that Gluttony managed to break free. Gluttony apparently intended to take revenge on Mustang for killing Lust. Upon arriving at the place, Gluttony immediately attacked Mustang and injured him quite badly. After that, Gluttony turned his attention to Winry, who was in a vulnerable position. But when Gluttony was about to kill Winry, Scar immediately saved her and told Edward and the others to leave the place while he would restrain Gluttony. After securing Mustang and Winry, the Elric brothers and Ling Yao then returned to help Scar. At the same time, Envy arrives at the scene to warn Gluttony not to devour Mustang and the Elric brothers, as they are potential human sacrifices for their grand scheme. However, when Gluttony was about to devour Ling Yao, Edward rushed to help Ling Yao and was accidentally swallowed by Gluttony, as well as Envy, who tried to save Edward. Inside Gluttony's stomach, Envy told Edward and Lingyao that anyone who was swallowed by Gluttony could never get out of his stomach. Furthermore, Envy explained that Gluttony's stomach is the portal of the truth created by their father. But apparently, it was one of their father's failures that Gluttony's stomach became the space between reality that could make anyone who was in it become weak until they finally died. Upon hearing that, Edward became annoyed and then attacked Envy. The film ends by showing Envy showing his true form, which turns out to be a green reptilian giant monster with 8 limbs, much like the basilisk, and a humanoid face with a nose and square teeth, retaining the red triangle on the forehead. How is the fate of Edward Elric next? Will he die in Gluttony's stomach, or will he find a way to get out of Gluttony's stomach and stop the evil plans of the homunculi? Don't miss the third part of the live-action film Fullmetal Alchemist, which will be recapped in the next video.